Greetings!
Hi.
I am Rowan and,
Mio nomen est Will.
Thanks, Will. Good Latin. This is our ancient Rome game show, Chad or no Chad. And today we'll be discussing key individuals from the 5 first Roman emperors. Thank you, Will.
First up, I will be doing Augustus's pals, starting with Mark Antony. While Marky Boy wasn't technically a key individual under one of the emperors, as there was no Augustus and no emperor when Antony lived, only Octavian, he cannot be missed for his critical role in the transformation of the Roman Republic into an empire. And, as one of the 3 men in the second triumvirate, Antony married Octavia, but continued to affair with Cleopatra after having 3 kids. Despite his marriage, this, among many other factors, led to a rivalry with Octavian. The ongoing hostility eventually erupted into a civil war in 31 BC as the Roman Senate, at Octavian's direction, declared war on Cleopatra and proclaimed Antony a traitor. Antony would be defeated at the Battle of Actium and would take his own life. If only for losing, we have deemed Mark Antony as a non-Chad.
Chad.
Thank you, Will.
Next up, Agrippa.
Well,
Next up, Agrippa. He will play a key role. Next up, Agrippa. He would play a key role in the battles against Antony when he was...
a snake.
Yeah, he was a snake. When he successfully ferried troops across the Adriatic Sea, and he would play a key role in many a battle before then, as he would prove himself an excellent general, statesman, and architect. Agrippa was a close personal friend, son-in-law, and lieutenant to our boy Augustus. Some of Agrippa's many achievements include putting down the rising of the Cantabrians in Spain in 19 BC, in 17 BC when he was appointed governor of the provinces, and in 13 BC when he began the conquest of Pannonia. And he, of course, built the Pantheon in his 3rd consulship and died at 51 in 12 BC. RIP. Father of Augustus's grandsons and later adopted sons, and intended as regent while they matured, Augustus was claimed to have said, "Sharer of my cares." How lovely. Agrippa was granted proconsular imperium and powers of tribune in 18 BC for 5 years, which he would later be renewed in 13 BC. Agrippa was truly a Chad. Next up, Julia and Livia. I do think that the Roman women deserve a mention, but being Roman women in a world recorded by shrivelly old men, they were of course scheming, deceitful scallywags who were either responsible for affairs, poisonings, or both. As the only true offspring of Augustus, married off 3 times as a political piece, and mother to all of Augustus's original intended heirs, Julia was sent disgraced into exile after a supposed affair with Mark Antony's son, Julius Antonius. The ancient sources certainly were not kind to Julia, so it's hard to say what she was really like, but as for the ancient sources go, she is a non-Chad. Thank you, Will. Livia, being a Roman woman, and after just hearing about Julia, it's safe to say that it is not looking good. Supposed poisoner of Augustus, putting her own son first constantly, and perhaps killing Agrippa Postumus, it is really not looking good. But she was wife to Augustus for 50 years, jinkies, that's a long time, and while they had no kids with each other, they can't have hated each other to have stayed married all this time. But, being a Roman woman, the answer is clear. Livia is, say it with me, Will, a non-Chad! Next up is Augustus's intended heirs. Now, spoiler alert, Augustus's intended heirs, well, they did not live long and happy lives, as he, intended a lot of heirs throughout his reign. And, well, good things happened to all of them. Marcellus was first, Augustus's nephew, married to Julia, given permission to take office 10 years before the legal age. He died at the age of 9 and 10. May the seven bless his soul. Chad. Agrippa Postumus, perhaps not so much. Augustus initially considered Postumus as a potential successor and formally adopted him as heir, but banished him from Rome in AD 6 on account of his beastly nature. I think we dodged a Joffrey Baratheon with that one. Non-Chad. Gaius and Lucius, in my opinion, were the best suited to the role, groomed personally from Augustus from an incredibly young age, a pair of rulers to take after Augustus and Agrippa, grandsons of Augustus who would later become adopted sons, and heirs, entering public life at 15 and 5 years of age, attending the Senate at 15, to be consuls at 20, and dead at 19 and 24. Tragic Chads. It is Tiberius time, ladies and gentlemen. There were many people pestering our son Tiberius, but only two really need to be talked about, and you already know who. Germanicus and Sejanus. Germanicus, son of Drusus and Antony the Younger, while technically a Claudian, had Julian blood, and was married to Agrippina, and sired many children, Caligula among them. A general and true, handsome Julio-Claudian, loved by all. And heir to Tiberius, would die on the 10th of October, AD 19, age 33, at the hands of snivelly beta man Piso. Supposedly. As a history video, we do have to mention that this is disputed and unconfirmed. That said, he totally did it. At the beginning of Tiberius's reign, several mutinies in the troops occurred, one of which was in the Rhine with Germanicus there to quench it. The troops are said to have wanted Germanicus as emperor, but he declined, staying loyal to our warty old Tiberius. He felt like reconquering over the Elbe, so he did it, no permission required. He honoured the long-dead troops, despite Tiberius's disapproval, and travelled the emperor without permission, despite Tiberius's whining. This man simply did not care about Tiberius's complaints, and it would seem from our starry-eyed sources he did care about the people's. Germanicus, baby. You are a Chad. Sejanus, a mere equite who rose almost to the top of the ladder, played his political games on anyone who would cross him. Prefect and commander of the Praetorian Guard, consul in 31 AD, and all but ruler of the empire when Tiberius chilled in Capri, he would kill Tiberius' son, further the distance between Agrippina and Tiberius, and manipulate the treason trials to rid him of any foe, only to fall at Tiberius' hand without Tiberius even being in Rome. In Tiberius' eyes, he was Agrippa come again. In ours, he was a non-Chad.
Next up we have Gaius, Caesar, Augustus, Germanicus. Next up we have Tiberius, Claudius, Caesar, Augustus, Germanicus. Valeria Messalina was the third wife of Claudius, who gave birth to Britannicus, who definitely had a very bright future ahead of him, who went to live a long and prosperous life, I'm very sure. She was treated harshly in the sources due to be a female Homo sapien, but was routinely called out on her alleged wholeness by the sources such as Pliny the Old, Tacitus, and Suetonius, to all talk of her record amount of acquaintances she had sleepovers with, which so many different sources mentioning it seems to have truth embedded in the bias, as it makes sense with her doing this to gain political influence. However, it's unlikely she went so far as the competition with the hired friend, which she won. She definitely had an affair with the consul designate Gaius Silius, in which she decided to openly marry him, which finally convinced Claudius of a more free-living nature. Claudius believed it when he saw his own furniture in Silius's house. This was blatant treason, as Claudius was afraid he would rise to be emperor. The Praetorian Guard went and booted Silius out of the server, and all his friends. A guardsman offered Messalina to help take the Roman way out, but she hesitated, so before the old slice and dice. Claudius, on hearing this, asked for more booze. She used Claudius's trust to have people executed, Atatius due to his nice-looking garden, and Claudius to prosecute him, where he then chose to rage quit. She got away with all this because Claudius seemed to be clueless about her manipulation and many friends. these high levels of control for a woman in Imperial Rome really gives her the honour of being a true CHADS.
Next in line, Freeman, featuring Narcissus.
Yo.
Claudius relied heavily on sharing his burdens with others. To help him with the governance, he tried to use the Senate. But since he was emperor, the Senate didn't really like him, and hence he relied on the freedman. But they got so much influence over him, they were seen to mock him openly, like Narcissus did, who was the emperor's secretary. Narcissus exercised great influence over Claudius, and amassed the enormous personal fortune of 400 million sesterces. Very fancy. The sources were very disapproving against this style of governance, especially Tacitus, who was a Senate member himself, and so would naturally detest the thought of a freedman in more power than his own. Tacitus, particularly in the chapters describing the fall of Messalina and the marriage to Agrippa, presents an emperor paralysed by weakness and indecision, and Narcissus, and the freedman in virtual control of the government. As Suetonius states outright, wholly enslaved to freemen and his wives, he acted not as a principus, but as a servant. This seems to have been running a weak head of state, relying on all this outside influence, and having people take advantage of him. But this line of thought comes from sources who showed hatred towards him, and so we shouldn't base all our interpretation on these biased opinions. The freedmen were totally loyal, set, and help him share the burden of such a vast empire without the vast amount of ulterior motives that members of the Senate would have. From ex-slaves achieving to rich guys at the top of the imperial court, they can be defined as true CHADS. Cafe Nero had many influences over him, as he was relatively young in the beginning of his reign and seemed as mainly positive influences over him, keeping him going from turning into a mad king. Agrippa the Younger, Nero's mummy, was one of the most influential people to him. She was so influential at the beginning she featured on coins at the same level with her son. But after he got into power, Seneca and Brutus influenced Nero to make himself more independent and distance old mummy, who came to resent after he expelled her, and so saw her as the main blockade in his pleasures, which he soon fixed. With no more restrictions on the boy King Tom and Nero, he was able to, according to Tacitus, plunge into the wildest inapproprieties. This means, before this, she defo held him back, hence she must have had a lot of influence, but she ended up losing it all, and dooming herself, hence being a non-CHADS.
Non-CHADS.
Seneca Active Learn and Burrus. They influenced Nero alongside Agrippa until Nero's rise to power, when they tried to halt her support. Then when she favoured Britannicus, they definitely didn't do anything at all. It was definitely luck that Britannicus shortly died. They definitely didn't poison Britannicus to secure their own power and Nero's by poisoning Britannicus. He definitely just died due to an epileptic fit right before he was to assume manhood. Definitely.
Makes sense.
Definitely. Burrus, the leader of the Praetorian Guard, kept the Praetorian Guard on his side during his secession, but in 62 he died by alleged poisoning by Nero, which moved Seneca to immediately resign.
Wise move.
In the Pisonian conspiracy in 65, Seneca was allegedly a part of it, and hence he was ordered to switch servers, which he promptly obliged. This symbolised that the last hold on Nero was lost, and hence he fully dived into an incomprehensible acts, such as playing the lyre and travelling to Greece on a vacation in 62. Truly a madman.
This is abhorrent news.
Seeing how fast Nero started acting so uncouth after he lost increasing levels of his restrainers by these two fine gentlemen, they must ascend to true Chadicus levels.
True Germanicus levels.